Ooh, getting nervous in a good way because planting seeds whānau. It's my great pleasure to welcome someone who has been such a influence but also support person in my journey. And it's only been the last few years that we have connected, but there's a saying that goes, it's not about the amount of time, but it's more so about the depth. And I feel there has been a lot of depth within these last 2 years of getting to know the brother who is going to be on the show, the journey that he is on, the way that he thinks, but the way that he uses his hands that is creating such a beautiful way of going about living, not only for himself but for those who are connected and are observing that journey from afar as well as close. So Brother Byron, welcome to the show, brother.
Great to be here, man. I like that you said not about time, right? It's about depth. And there's a handful of people that you meet and come across in your life that have that impact. You can think back on like the handful of people in anybody's life who are like, oh man, that person has such a strong connection. And it's that positive thing on both ends, where you feel uplifted and inspired after a conversation with them. And you're definitely one of those people for me. So thank you very much, man.
It's the reciprocal nature of being in a connection or being in a relationship or friendship. It's you're coming to a table such as this and you're sharing, and what you're sharing is being helpful, or it's being heard, or it's being received well. And then the reciprocal nature of that is that one side of the table isn't just giving, but it's being reciprocated by what is being received on the other side. And that's the notion, or that's the way that I feel, and that sense of depth is like, man, you can go there because it's just in that kind of format. And, for you, brother, for those who might not know of who you are, can you just give a brief background of, who you are and, what it is that you're about?
Yeah, fantastic. So not from New Zealand, came here about 6 years ago with my family from the United States. I grew up when I was a young kid, just like playing outdoors all the time, right? In the forest, behind the house, in the streams, just like going on adventures. Back in like the 90s, I was born in 1995. And that was the time when parents would just kind of like let you out for the day. You would just like come back at the end of the weekend, like mud on your face, just like outdoors all weekend long. And that was kind of the childhood that I had. And that's influenced a lot of who I am today. Spending time outside, and, I went to summer camps, and I went to this outdoor school where field trips were like a huge portion of like what we were doing. Is every Friday, the whole school would be empty because we'd always be going outside to do like, when you're younger, it's just like go outside, go on walks, trails. But as we moved through the school, it was focused on science, research, ecology, and understanding ecosystems, and stewardship is the word that stands out. Right? There's this woman named Jane Goodall, and she did this whole thing with chimpanzees, and the whole school was kind of based around this premise that we are here to be good stewards of the earth. And so teaching kids that stewardship ethic when they're young, the idea was that kind of builds the foundation for how they relate to not just the world, but themselves and their local community. And without thinking about it at that age, it absolutely worked. Because now that's exactly what I do here today, is I play outside, same thing, planting trees, pruning trees, and working with the local landscape. There's a bunch of stuff in between, but that's the idea.
I remember our first conversation that we did have, we caught up at a local coffee shop in town, and
it's closed now.
It is closed
Makes
now.
Me sad.
Bro, me and Hinepane like talking about it often. I was like, man, if that place was open, that was so good. The bagels, the smoothie bowls. Anyway, Lulu's, if you're hearing this, come back.
That first chat we had was great because it modeled how so many of our future conversations would unfold.
Yeah, for sure. I even like how, as I think about that, how foundation is so important, and their first interaction is the foundation of their connection. And I always have such a vivid memory of that because of what stood out to me very clearly is that, you're someone who, works with the land, you plant trees, food, forestry, and we're talking about all of those things, but then we're also talking about life. And everything that I would talk about are things that I'm going through, things that I'll, observe from what you're sharing. There was always it's just like that in the food forest. And there was always a similarity And it was almost like it was parallel to what I was experiencing, what you were experiencing, but nature, the taiao, is mirroring, all of these human experiences that we have. And so when did that become obvious for you? When you from a young age, or did it start to develop as you went through life yourself more?
Yeah, I only got into the food forest thing like 5 years ago. And I got into it because I was like, oh, food forests sound cool. I like fruit trees. That sounds fun. I'll just do this food forest thing. And it had nothing to do with like personal growth, none of that. It was like, fruit's cool. I like planting trees. I want to be part of an ecosystem. Let's just plant a food forest. It was trendy. It was just the beginning of, when the world was shutting down. And so that was the start of something that I had no idea what would unfold, but it turned out to be something that the more you get into it, the more you realize, oh man, this isn't just about growing food. It's not about the fruit trees. It's not even about just the ecosystem. You're learning about these patterns of life, not just plants, not just animals, but these same patterns exist in us. And the thing that keeps coming up is these patterns is like the disturbance cycle, right? In a food forest, just like in our life, we have these disturbance cycles that force growth. If you don't prune your food forest heavily, it doesn't have that disturbance and it doesn't have that response. And so when we're going through hard times in our lives, and I think this is like the connection point that everybody can resonate with, is like when you're going through a hard time in your life, understand that it's a moment in time and the response to that will be your growth. And that's a pattern through life, not just in plants, but in our own as well.
Mm. And so that's the pruning part of it, eh? You're pruning things because that's going to support future growth. And what is the challenge within that? Say if we were to relate it to, in food forestry or working in that kind of environment, you're doing that to bring more light in. You're doing that because you're seeing growth in other areas, but that's in a food forest. How can we see that in our own personal lives when it comes to these challenges that we're facing? Because oftentimes we don't see it. And so what are some of the things that come to mind for you in regards to that?
The biggest one is NO. Like learning how to say no to things, learning how to cut certain things off, even if it feels, but I like this tree. Or I like this part of, this part of this relationship, even if it's not serving where you want to be going. Right? It's learning how to make those decisions. Like the word decide is like to actually kill off an option. Mm. And so when you're presented with like all these you can do unlimited things in the world, right? There's no limit to like what's out there for you. But in terms of getting to where you want to go is about making decisions that basically cut off everything that's not taking you there. Mm. And so in the food forest, that looks like, hey, if this one tree is dominating, but your goal is in the understory, you need to say no and prune some of this away to let this tree grow a little bit more.
I like that. It's that saying around when you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And it's being able to have the awareness, but also the strength to be able to go with what you know is right and what you know is going to be hard in the short term, but it's going to give that reward in the long term. And as I observe your journey over these last few years, it feels like you're just so in the moment and you know how to work really, really hard. And this isn't just out in the field, but you're working on yourself mentally. You're working on yourself in terms of the business that you're creating, building community. And so there's this huge work ethic that you're doing at the moment. And you know it's not for now. You know it's because of what's to come. And is that a space that you've just grown to enjoy, because you know that there's all these options and you're saying no to everything else, but it feels like you're just so determined on the yeses and the now?
It's gotten easier. I think it starts off a lot harder when there's not the positive feedback loops in place yet. Like you haven't seen the benefit of like saying no to certain things. Now that I've gone through a few seasons of like, let's be clear, I'm super selfish. Like I'm only child, love attention, super selfish. And the selfish part is I don't split my time in a lot of places. So when people ask, oh, come do this, come do like, a lot of times I say no, not because I don't value that person, but because I value so much the ability to focus on my own thing. And I've now, after a few seasons of like radically saying no to things, I've seen what that focus can bring for me. I've seen how much it can move me towards, just like in the radical pruning in the food forest. If you're real delicate with it, if you're like, oh, it's time to prune, it's springtime, I'll do a little snips here and there. It's not that powerful in terms of moving the whole succession forward, right? Whereas when you're really radical in the food forest, when you're pruning things heavily, it's not just about sunlight. It's about this whole systemic thing, right? Systemic as in like it's all interconnected. And so you saying no to the one family gathering or to the one thing that a friend invites you to, it's not necessarily about that one little thing, but it's the systemic nature of you getting the skills to say no and to focus on what's really important for you. And like, if that's important for you, like spending time with family or doing these events or what, like, great. But identify what's important to you. Figure out, like, all right, what is it? If I'm going to dedicate this chapter, right, this like 5-7 year chapter of my life to something, because you can accomplish a lot in 5 to 7 years. What do I want to accomplish out of that?
It's their clarity, having clarity on that, and then your reverse engineering to the now. And how you show up in that now is either going to be the difference of you getting there or not. And have you had moments where I've set a 5-year plan. Have you gotten there faster, or have you gotten there like a lot slower, or is this a new thing that you're working through at the moment?
It's fun. I've stopped planning my own life in terms of like 5-7 years because so much can change and you can actually get so much done. Like if you imagine your 5-year goal, if you just say, well, what would it take to get there in 6 months? So like so much can happen in such a short time. It's almost like too abstract for me to think like, oh, 5 years, I want to, no. In terms of the food forest stuff, I'm planting seeds, name of the podcast, shout out. Love that name, by the way. I'm planting seeds that will take a decade, 2 decades to get like really productive. Macadamias, for example. I've planted a ton of macadamias in the food forest, knowing that they're going to take 10, 15 years to like start being productive. That's one of the end goals. And so when I'm thinking of like managing the agroforest, when I'm thinking about managing the food forest in the years up to that, I'm thinking, all right, well, I'm doing this for the macadamias. I'm pruning heavily. Yeah, I'll sacrifice some guavas. I'll sacrifice some papayas in the early years, right? I'll still get some, but that's not the ultimate goal. So it's like a nice bonus that I get the guavas and the macadamias are the long-term thing.
Man, that's a really cool way to look at it. And for those of the listeners who might be tuning in, they might not even know what a food forest is. In their mind, they might just think, oh, food forest is a garden. But can you explain to the listeners, what a food forest is, and perhaps maybe using what a regular garden that everyone would, commonly know as, like, what are the differences between those two parts of growing food?
Yeah, this is great. So imagine you take like a square meter piece of land, right? Grass. Take the grass away, you'd plant everything in that 1 square meter. So you're planting annual vegetables, things like lettuce, tomatoes, corn, squash, beans. But you're also planting things that live a little bit longer. Perennial vegetables, maybe things like asparagus, artichokes, berries, love blueberries, raspberries. And basically what you're doing is you're planting all of this in 1 square meter, right? Even things that live longer than that. Guavas, tamarillos, bananas, sugarcane, all the way up to the things that are, like I said, the macadamias that take 15 years. And so you're planting that all in 1 square meter, knowing that I'm not going to be harvesting lettuce out of here in 3 years. I'll have harvested the lettuce, but in 3 years, I'll be harvesting blueberries, right? And the raspberries and the guavas and the papayas. And so you're watching this 1 square meter develop over those 10 years. Each year, it becomes more productive in a different way, higher succession, right? And so that's the difference between a food forest and a garden. A garden, you're just kind of constantly replanting annual vegetables. Maybe it's just berries and you keep it as that. Whereas this food forest is a dynamic thing that's moving in time and growing in what's called succession. Ecological succession is this idea that edibles are not landscapes recover on their own, right? If a landslide happens in the bush, which it happens quite often, if you zoom out and kind of watch that piece of land naturally regenerate over 100 years, right? If you can like speed it up and watch it over the course of 60 seconds, you'll see the landscape change. These communities of plants will go from these early succession, like spiky things that are really tolerant of hot sun, poor conditions. And that plant community will shift over time to in 100 years. It's this like big, beautiful forest that you would never thought like 100 years ago was this landslide. So we're replicating that in an edible way.
Wow, man. So even, coming back to that, say a landslide happens, there's already things in the natural world in that space that is already now working to evolve and what's actually happening there? Is it just reproducing like that piece of land that wasn't there? And so you're taking that and you're using it within the agroforestry or in the food forestry that in terms of using land in a more productive way rather than, am I on the same thing there or is there something that I'm missing?
Yeah, the way that I like to think about it is like, especially when you compare it to regular agriculture, right? Which is this cycle of like grow annual crops, corn, whatever. You grow it, you cut it down, and then the land sits bare, and then you just go back and replant that same thing next year. The land doesn't improve by doing that. Whereas,
I see.
you see?
Yeah.
And so instead
So
of
food forestry is actually helping the land. And then the other way of doing it is just using it for what it is rather than actually evolving the land.
It's not even just using it as it's because we're working against nature, right? When you go pull all the weeds out of your garden, when you spray poisons to get rid of the weeds, that's us working against nature. Nature is trying to not have any bare soil. Nature is trying to, and nature will win always. Nature will always create a forest, right? It just depends on the time scale. Like if we just abandon this whole city, right? How long would it take for it to become a forest again? Not that long, right? Trees would start popping up in the sidewalks, in the cracks, in the driveways. Fast forward 200 years, it'll look like a forest, guarantee. And so what we're doing is instead of fighting against nature in our gardening, in our agriculture, in our food production, instead of fighting against, we're actually just turning and working alongside the engine that runs the earth, which is ecology, the advancement of these ecosystems. And so instead of fighting again, and the same with the personal growth stuff, if you keep fighting against these things, like you keep fighting against the more painful parts about yourself, you don't want to look at that. Oh, it's shameful.
Ooh.
Right? Instead of just saying, actually, yeah, I do have some shame there. How can I work on that? How can I use that to my advantage to become a better person? That's the difference.
So it's working with it rather than running away from it or working against it. Because that's always just because it's always going to be there. If you spray weeds over time, it's just going to come back. Just like those things that we're avoiding. We can only push it down so long until it keeps coming up and up and up. But I really like that whakaaro, bro. And it's getting a lot more popular, food forestry. Are you seeing that? So one of the things that I want to acknowledge you on is that you've done it on your own, in your own backyard. And you've been able to see the benefits of it. You've now been able to support others in doing it within their own land and even helping people who are passionate about it get into being able to support people because there's only one Byron. And so you're building a community where this can happen a lot more. And the thing that I want to acknowledge you on mostly is that you're helping marae and hapu schools develop these food forest systems that is going to be helpful for the community, for the marae, for the hapu. And so how's that been for you to see how this has been there's a lot more traction and there's a lot more interest based on you done it as an individual and now you're seeing the growth of it. What's that been like for you?
I think it's rewarding in the same way that it was for me in the sense that I thought it was about the food forest when I first started out. I thought it was just about the detail of the food forest, but really the food forest is just the vehicle towards understanding our place in the ecosystem. It's a vehicle for reconnecting with people in our local community. It's a place for reconnecting with other people and other friends. Like, hey, come hang out in the food forest, come prune, come harvest fruits, and let's connect. There was this great project that we did up in at a marae up in Tauranga, and one of the folks during the installation said, hey, like the community came together for this day, and like I was connecting with people that, are part of the iwi, but I haven't spoken to in years. I had hardly connected with them in the last decade. And so it's, again, not about the food forest. It's a vehicle for reconnecting with the land, reconnecting with the community, reconnecting with your sense of self, how you belong in all of that.
Wow, that's so cool. It's cool that you're seeing that because you have a good understanding and an intimate relationship, with food forestry, even just your upbringing. There's just been a lot of beautiful ingredients that have given you this good understanding of not only yourself, of what's going on, but you're now seeing that in other people. And you're that person who can help them identify, this is not about food forestry. That's the cream of the crop at the top there, but look at how you're developing, look at communities that are strengthening because of it. And food is always going to be the center as well. And you're giving people the tools to be able to not only provide food for themselves, but it's a different way of providing food, And so for you, thinking about that, what's next for you? Because you're in Food Forest Pioneers, you're now moving into the online space. How is that all looking?
Yeah, to provide context, I started this out not knowing anything about nothing. Right? Like I came from a background of like enjoying being outside, adventures, mountain biking, camping. We were talking about that a little bit before, but I wasn't into gardening. I was never really into gardening. It wasn't an interest of mine. I liked ecology. I liked ecosystems, trees. I did research about tree ecology, but it was never gardening. And even still, it's not about that for me. It's about relating with the ecosystem, planting trees. And I think that that's the thing that's fun for me, is watching other people get excited about that, watching other people go through their own journey. It's not always going to be an exact mirror of my journey. Everybody's journey is unique, even within like how you interact with your food forest. You're going to take different things away. But I think just lowering the barrier of entry for people and showing people, and that's what a lot of the work I do in the community that I have online is called. It's called the Food Forest Fellowship, and it's people all around the world who are interested in growing food forests, who are already growing food forests, or people who are interested in doing food forest design work, right, for their local community. Every community has a plumber. Every community has a tradie. Every community should have somebody you can go to help. Hey, how do I plant a food forest?
Damn, that's really cool. And so you're working with people all over the world, and, part of your own, journey has been going to all of the black belts of this industry or this space. And, you've gone to Brazil, you've gone back home to the States, and you're traveling around the world, learning from these people, and you're bringing it back, which is helping you be, what would it be? A more valuable teacher for those who are coming into, your community. And when you think about going to all the black belts and, the driving of the passion to actually get on a plane and, you're not just there for a holiday, you're actually working and you're away from home for, 6 months, and talk about that as well. And what you're learning, as a practitioner, but also as a leader of, the people who are looking to you for that guidance. And so, what are the key things that have come out for you?
It's what we were saying before. It comes from insecurity, right? I was looking at myself and thinking, man, I talk a lot about this thing, but like, how can I make myself, how can I put myself into situations where I can develop the evidence where I am undeniably great? Because I can't just do that hanging out and doing things in my own backyard, right? We like to think like, oh, we know what we're doing. We know what we're talking about. But I think if you look more at the deficiencies that you have and addressing those rather than like tooting your own horn and thinking I'm not the greatest, right? I still don't think that I'm that great, but I'm learning. I'm on this journey, right? I'm only 5 years in. And so I think the first time I went to Brazil was last year, because I was like, man, I have so much more to learn. And my environment here, I wasn't learning as much. Stagnating. How do you stop a food forest from going stagnant? Heavy disturbance. So what did that mean? Humbling myself, going somewhere where the black belts are, right? This practice of syntropic agroforestry or food forests developed in Brazil in the 70s. This like more cutting edge practice of incorporating all these different tree species, heavy pruning. That practice was originated in Brazil, right? That's how indigenous people in South America, the Americas, all around the world, that's how they practiced agriculture. So that technology is really alive, and the birthplace in many ways is in Brazil. So that's why I went there, learned from the black belts, humble myself, address those insecurities of, man, I gotta level up.
Level up you did too, brother. And where was the evidence did you see the evidence of that trip or trips in terms of how you feel about yourself in the space now? And also, has some of those systems that you learnt over in Brazil been helpful for what's happening here on the Whenua and Aotearoa?
Oh, it's fantastic. You get back and you immediately realize all those learnings. You get back and you have just a different way of looking at things, a different techniques to apply them.
Man. And what's it been like in terms of, we're talking about black belts, the way that you live your life at the moment, as you said, it's selfish. You're putting all the things that, all your energy into things that are helping with your mission or with your own connection to self. And a part of your daily schedule is going to the Red Dungeon, and practicing jiu-jitsu. And so talk about that journey for yourself, brother.
It's the same thing. Getting chopped down forces growth, right? Every day I'm getting chopped down in the Red Dungeon by people who are much bigger than me, much stronger than me, much more advanced. And that process forces you to grow, right? And I've seen it, whether it's physically in the gym, it doesn't have to be martial arts. It can just be training, can be running, whatever it is for you. In your emotional life, in your family life, in your business, in the landscape, holding your feet to the fire and looking at and not shying away and defending your deficiencies, right? Holding your feet to the fire. I think being this, having radical accountability is that practice of holding your feet to the fire, looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, what's wrong with me? What do I need to fix? Maybe the biggest things, all right, put that on the shelf for now, but what's something about myself that I can improve? Go to the gym, make your bed, have those conversations that are hard, say no to things that maybe don't serve your goals as much as you'd like. If you're not in the place where you want to be, start saying no to more things. Look at the local landscape and see, what's not right about this? What can I do to improve this place? And I think that's one of the biggest things is and this wasn't even connected to land stewardship as much, but when I was younger doing all these camping trips, one of the rules that, it was in Boy Scouts, that's what it was. Going through the Boy Scouts to become an Eagle Scout, one of the biggest things you learn is when you're traveling through and camping and going backpacking is you always leave the place better than you found it. And so if you apply that to your interactions with other people, you apply that with your home, a room that you walk into. What can I do just before I leave to make the place better than I found it?
And that's a, way of being. When we think about, even te ao Māori, there's manaakitanga, there's kaitiaki, and it's having that way of approaching things and leaving things better than you found it. It's a common practice that, we like to look at from a Māori worldview, but, these are things that are being taught, to other cultures from a young age as well. And when you have that way of approaching things, the thing that, I'm hearing from you, but that I got from it as well is when we're always looking at ourselves, and if we are, and we do have radical accountability, maybe not even radical, even just some sense of accountability, we know that there's something within us that could be left in a better place. And that's being able to work through those things, that's being able to surface it, that's being able to have the necessary conversations. And oftentimes, those are the parts where the growth is occurring. It's stepping into that. It's acknowledgement of it. And the thing I feel that could be challenging for, I'm going to say for men, because that's what I feel like I can speak to, is that we're so solution orientated. And if we don't have the solution, I feel in my own personal experience, I feel inadequate because I'm going through something. I want to be able to work through it, but I don't know what that next step is. And it's that might even have prevented me from stepping into the unknown. And it's the patience that's in that space that's helping with my own sense of maturity or helping myself through it. And so when you think about, raising things that, you want to be able to work through, you have to step into it, you have to have integrity to yourself. What are some of the emotions or practices that you use to give you the courage to be able to do what you need to do?
think one of the frames that comes to mind is that the longer you delay and wait, you're just pushing your own results back even further, right? Even if it's an imperfect action, you're never going to have the whole plan. It's never going to feel like the right time. You're never going to wake up and be like, all right, I got it all figured. Like, you just got to take the steps, right? It's like that image of the windy road with a car on the windy road. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you don't need to see the whole road because it's around the corner, but you just need to see what's in front of you. Cool. Take that step. That will illuminate the next steps for you. And so I've used this like for this mental frame for years, is like, if I have a big goal, I don't focus on like what steps 7, 8, 13, 14 are. I look at what's one thing I can do today. Because that one step will illuminate the next step. Even if it's not even a perfect step. Even if I misstep, okay, cool. It's not that one. Back a little bit.
And that's the frame. It's having that awareness of knowing that if I adopt this mental model, if I adopt this way of looking at things, rather than the mental models or the frames that are keeping us held back, rather than stepping into that action. And those are the things that we're looking at, is, okay, what is preventing me? And if we can see that
Fear.
Yeah, it's the fear.
Fear of messing up.
Yeah.
And I'm fine making mistakes. I make mistakes every day. I make mistakes every day in the gym and get choked out. All right, cool. Restart. Don't make that same, I made the same mistake again. All right.
I reckon that's such a cool way of looking at it though. Because fear is a big thing, you know, when we're trying to be the better versions of ourselves, we're trying something that we're passionate about, but we don't have the skill set to. So we don't really get into it at all. And thinking about if we just know where it is that we want to be or something that we do want to try, that's the zoom out perspective. Now it's about zooming in. And that's what's my action today. If I was to leave something, I guess, within this segment that we're talking about, one of the apps that I use is called Dailyo, and it's a journal app, but it measures your mood for the day, where you can say you feel rad, you feel good, and it has a variety of different emotions. And so you choose how you're feeling that day. It opens up to a journal where you can talk about things that are going on. There's places where you can have a list of things that you want to do. And then it also gives you an opportunity to do a video or take a photo. And the reason why I'm putting this here is that when I have that zoom out perspective of knowing what it is that I'm trying to achieve or working towards, the zoom in perspective is what I put in my Dailyo. My one action today is have an awesome podcast with about Byron. You know, the other things that I'm doing has to align to where it is that I'm working towards. And so I just wanted to leave that here for the listeners. You know, look into Dailyo if you want to be more practical with your days and be not just productive, but to optimize. And you've taught me something around the best way to go about things is to not always about maximize, but to optimize. So can you talk about that, bro?
I will, but before we get there, I wanted to say one thing about there's an opportunity right here, right? We're moving, I don't know when this is going to air, but going into 2025, if you look back on this last year, right, and you think of like the best 10 days you had, what happened in those days? What made those days so stand out? What are the things that pop up and when you're thinking about like, what were some great days that I had? Well, I spent a lot of time outside in the sun. Well, I worked really hard. I spent time with people that I really love. I ate good food. I worked, like I just poured myself into something that I care a lot about. You start teasing out these common threads between your top 10 days. And we've kind of been talking about this a little bit in terms of like creating content. You can talk about it in terms of anything, but if you're looking at how do I maximize or optimize my days for the next year, is like look back at the last year of super quality days, find the themes, and then just try and incorporate those into all your days. So right now, I've discovered that going to training, very important for me to have a good day. What do? I train almost every day. Spend time outside almost every day. Eat good food. Eat ice cream almost every single day. Right? I'm building my favorite day. I'm building my perfect day into every day. Right? And so we're talking about the difference between maximizing and optimizing. I like ice cream. Maximizing is like eating ice cream for every meal. That's not optimizing. Once a day, that's great. But in terms of like, you know, balancing the family versus work time or even training, right? If I spent every single waking hour in training, that's maximizing. Living at the gym, that's not optimizing, right? So it's finding that balance that works for you in terms of what's going to move you towards your goals, but not detract.
That's the way to go about it. And I really enjoyed when you said that, because I've done this, I can't remember what it is, but it's like one of those human behavior tests that speaks about your qualities or your attributes that are most aligned, to yourself. And my number one has been a maximizer. And this is just, I forget, I should actually know it, but I don't. But I could always remember that, there was something that I found a lot of pride in. It's being a maximizer. It's being able to get the most out of everything or do the most towards something. And so hearing the maximizer and optimizing in the same sentence was really awesome for me to see that. And the reason why is because I can maximize things, but the question came, am I optimizing what I'm doing in that day or the work that I'm doing for what it is that I'm doing? And, to give context, there's the podcast, there's my online spaces, there's online work, there's fun. So these are just the few hats that I wear within my life. But on a day, I could try and do all of those things. And so I'm moving the needle just slightly. But recently, after that conversation that we've had, on one day, I'm only focusing on one thing. And that's just the podcast. The next day is just the online community. The next day, I'm just being able to optimize my days based on the work that I enjoy to do, rather than just doing a little bits here and there on the one day. That's the maximizer. But the optimizer is changing how I'm doing things, but maximizing that particular day. And so I just wanted to share, because we're talking about things that I feel we've spoken about a lot, but I feel adding how that has been incorporated in actual life is where people might be able to see. And so the way that you live, bro, is really true to you. And it's taken some time perhaps for you to get there. What's something ahead that is just really exciting for you? What is getting you up out of bed? What is the thing that is burning inside of you that is giving you the energy to do what you're doing?
I've been doing this for now 5 years, this food foresting. And every year it compounds on itself, right? It gets better and better every single year. And the same thing with my skills, right? And the same thing with where I'm pouring my energy. So a year's worth of effort now is worth like 5 years of hard effort when I first started. And so the thing that gets me going is, man, if I can just pour, and I poured a lot of myself into what I do. Like I said, very selfish. Like I don't have that many responsibilities other than pursuing what I want to be doing, which is a really free place to be. But what it means is that I get to be so focused and pour all of myself into what I'm interested in, which at the moment, continuing to learn, upskill, pour into my online community, learn about how to be a better agroforestry or a better food forestry practitioner, and how to share value with people who are interested in that. So I don't know what the next 5 years brings, but what I'm excited about is to just keep learning, right? Keep growing my skills, keep sharing, keep putting more of this out there.
And I feel, being a close friend of yours, I'll get the front row seats of that grind, and, the conversations that we do have. It's just so inspiring to know that, you're really just out here every day, no days off, and seeing that firsthand in the seasons that you've been in, and you're just so tunnel vision, and it's inspiring for someone who has the same ambition around creating that beautiful life, but also having impact. And seeing you build this community out, and, you're doing a few things in there at the moment, which is the games that you just done over the weekend. And can you talk a little bit about your online community, bro? Because I'm sure there are people who are listening who, one, may not even have known what food forestry is, but they might want to know a little bit more. And can you talk a bit about, what your online community is?
Yeah, the games. I'm glad you mentioned the games. Very exciting thing. It's another example of how taking just fast action is better than no action, right? We had just in the community finished this 5-week training, this 5-week course, basically. And at the end of it, we were left with like, cool, like there's a vacuum. What do we want to fill this space and time with? There was a couple suggestions from the community and said, hey, what if we do like community design for each other's projects? That's a great idea. So formulated this idea for a game show, a food forest game show where basically people within the community come together, they get put on teams, and they all, as these teams, create food forest designs for the one person's project. And we made it a game show, so people get cash prizes for having, the best design, and there's group prizes, individual prizes, but it's just that thing of not being afraid to fail and accepting feedback, right? The feedback was really good for the first games. So cool, we're going to keep doing it, and we're going to focus more of the community on that. But basically, the Food Forest Fellowship, which is this online community, is kind of composed of two different groups of people who have land, who want to grow a food forest, maybe don't know how, and people who kind of want to become consultants, who've been doing a little bit of food forestry for a while. And so my role there is just supporting, right? I've learned a lot. I spent a lot of time with the black belts in Brazil, Costa Rica, Florida. So I'm just passing on lessons there and giving people the support where I can, and also making it really fun. The game show, everybody loves it, right? But really, it's been such a rewarding thing, almost very similar to the food forest journey. Like I started the food forest not thinking it was going to be this big life transformative thing. There's one of my first YouTube videos I published was like just of me starting this food forest. Like I have no idea. If I go back and watch that video, which is hard to watch, like 5 years ago, I'm sure you find the same thing of watching a video of yourself 5 years ago. It's super cringy, but I go back and I'm like, man, I had no idea what was going to unfold. I had no idea. And I probably wouldn't have believed myself if I went back in time and said, hey, this is all what's going to unfold if you just keep going down this path, keep going. Wouldn't have believed myself. And so I think the community thing, I don't know where it's building towards, but I know that it's going to build towards something incredible if I keep pouring into it. And so I'm just going to keep dedicating, keep doubling down, because I've seen now that positive feedback thing. When you keep pouring into something and you're not looking to maximize, but optimize, right? I'm trying to optimize. How can I make this community valuable for everybody? If you have land and you want to learn, if you want to become a consultant, how do I make this something that's extremely valuable? So that's my mission that I'm on.
Man, thinking about the season you're in at the moment, what is the one thing that you've learned about yourself that perhaps you're still learning, perhaps that you're still working through, but what is this season surfacing for you?
That's a good question. Going to Brazil, spending time with the black belts, I've been dedicating nothing but all of myself to this for the last 5 years. And so now when I go spend time with the black belts who are doing this professionally, who have been for decades, I'm realizing that now my limiting factor, right, the thing that's limiting me in my capacity to what I'm able to achieve in this world, is not my skills at food forestry. You get incremental improvements. The thing that's limiting my capacity now is my own personal growth in other aspects of life, the people side, right? That's a lot of how, whether it's like the entrepreneurial journey or whether it's just in regular life, is like, first it's a skills development thing, and then it's the people development thing, right? Because I spend a lot of time talking with people who want to live in community, right? I want to live in a community on land with people, share this dream of like some kind of shared cohabitation living space. It's always the people side of things that gets in the way. And it gets in the way a lot because people skills are hard. We used to live in like small communities. We live in more isolated, nuclear families now. We don't get those skills. And so learning to be a good communicator, learning people skills, learning people skills in terms of like managing people, whether you're hiring, that's the limiting factor. So that's what I'm leaning into this season, is learning how to become a better leader.
One of those limiting factors yet again, eh? And as we're talking, throughout this whole conversation, that seems to be something that we come back to, because the way that I see that is there's awareness, or there's an observation, of where life is currently. And there's things to be really, really grateful for and happy for. But there's those other areas where it's like, okay, this is not where it should be. And instead of looking at that and being like, okay, this needs to be fixed, and pointing, there's more of a opening to see that that's not where it should be. So here, it's on me. And you've spoken to me about this, plenty of times around, we've been talking about, radical accountability. And so when things aren't right, it's on me. When things are good, that's on me. And having that way of, looking at life, progress is a sure thing. Because when we think about community or being in a space where we're supporting others, or you're even looking at your own personal life, we're the limiting factor. We're the cap on where there might be not much progress happening. It's on us. And so that radical accountability and being able to have that way of, I guess, interpreting life, it puts us in such a, what would it be? I don't think more powerful position, but it positions us well to be able to work on what needs to be worked on, rather than just being at the mercy of things that we feel are outside of our control. But the things that are within our control, it's stepping into that space, right?
Your whole world is a result of you. All your decisions have led you to be sitting right here in front of me, right? All the good and the bad, and everybody listening too. And I think that is a much more powerful frame to realize that, yeah, maybe some things haven't played out the way that I want them to, but they're lessons and there's feedback there if I'm open to it. If I'm not open to it, then okay, I'll just keep segmenting that portion of my results off and saying, well, I was just a victim of circumstance. There's a really great example with, even if it's a small backyard section and you have a little garden, you probably have a corner that you also just kind of try not to look at. Just don't look at that corner of the garden. What I've found is that the biggest leaps forward can be made in those ugly corners. Rather than focusing on the garden that's already nice. It's nice to spend time there. It's nice to spend time in the flowers, the area that you pay the most attention to. If I've got all these areas of the property that are turned into food forest, I've noticed this myself. I have an area that I just kind of go to naturally because it's the best. It feels the best. It's the most developed. It's nice. But that takes me away from going to the ugliest area. So now I have to make a conscious effort. All right, I'm going to go spend time in the ugly area, because time and attention is what's going to fix that. Time and attention. If I'm over there, I'll start tending to things. I'll start making it better than I found it. Versus just only spending time in a place that feels nice. And again, it's what season of life are you in? Right? Are you in the season of life where you just want to be comfortable? You just want to, all right, I just want to kick my feet up, relax, feel good in my garden. Cool. If you're in a space where you're no, I have a lot of leveling up to do. I have a lot of growth. I have a lot of potential inside of me. How can I tap into that? You got to go spend time in the ugly corner of the garden, which in yourself is the part of yourself that you're oh man, I don't like that part of myself. I got to look at that. I got to spend time and sit with that. What can I do to make that better?
Taking all that on board, brother. Taking all that on board for me personally. It's such a good reminder that if we are clear on where we are, but also where we want to be, it highlights the areas that we need to work on. And oftentimes it's looking at the parts of us that we don't want to look at, the insecurities, the negative thoughts, the behavioral patterns, the actions or lack of actions that we're taking. It's in those areas that if we did spend a bit of time there, would notice so much changes within the trajectory of our lives, because we can always look at the good things. And I'm someone who looks at the good things as a way to bring me to a space of gratitude, but I have to use that gratitude and direct it towards the areas that I struggle with, rather than just getting hyped on that. And one of my biggest lessons that that I know that I'm stepping into is humility. Humility has been something that I, after reflecting on this 2024 year, humility has been something that I want to develop more within myself. And it's not to have the sense of ego around when things are going good, get high on that. But it's when things are going good, have the humility to know that the pendulum will swing to challenging times. And have humility there too, because the pendulum is going to swing to the better times, rather than just getting caught up in one state, that's in the negative or the positive. And so the humility is what I feel keeps us in that neutral and balanced space where we can be more rational, we can have more emotional intelligence when we are leading with humility. And so that's what I'm looking to develop moving into 2025, is knowing that things aren't always guaranteed. The notion of impermanence is real, and the mind can get caught and get fixed on things being one way all the time. And that's the nature of the ego. But humility is the thing that is willing to be, the thing that is willing to change, the thing that is going to be a good companion, throughout these different things that we go through in life. And so when you think about humility, is there any thoughts or anything that you can add to that?
Are you familiar with The Hero's Journey?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what comes to mind. Hey, is like
Joseph Campbell.
80% of the hero's journey, it's not going so well. It's like challenges, struggle, like the darkest hour, like insurmountable odds, light at the end of the tunnel, get smacked down again. Right? You cut the head off of the dragon, 14 grow back. It's these challenges. And I think it's not trying to just always be in that winning, made it to the top of the mountain state. Because when you look back at like the best parts of an adventure,
that's right.
Climbing the mountain, or when I just talked about like being in university, I wasn't talking about, man, getting the test results back was like, I didn't care about that. Yeah, sure, we got 100%. But what was most fun, the best part of that was the suffering. The struggling of like, all right, we're grinding this out for a week, and like, that's the fun part. And so it's not even trying to avoid the struggle. It's like, how can I pick a mountain where I'm just like, there's a lot of climbing to do, and it's a big, hard one. And it's challenging, it's suffering, but it's towards something that is meaningful for me. I think that's something that has been illuminated for me recently is, again, the food forest is just a vehicle, right? Whether your thing is like art production, whether it's, whatever thing is yours, if you're meaningfully involved in it, set yourself like a really big challenge, a big goal, so that you can spend you can maximize the time where you're climbing that mountain. Because it's not the top of the mountain that's the reward. You come down off the mountain, but the reward is the person that you become by climbing it. And that's also the part that we look back on most fondly. Like, man, I remember when I was climbing that mountain, it was 3 a.m, we were climbing it, it was dark and we were sweating, but we made it. Right?
The journey. I like how we can always reflect on those challenging times, but it's also those challenging times that make for the great times. If you don't go through those lulls, you don't even know what the hell a high is. And so it's building a different relationship with challenges, even with our own sense of, what brings the fear or the anxiety or whatever the emotion or the pullback is that's the thing that's actually encouraging us to take that step forward, because it does mean something to us, rather than letting it have that sense of control. It's us being in the driver's seat and being able to use it, towards pushing us into these triumphant, states. Because as you see it, 80% of the journey is challenging. It can be hard, but it's the perspective that is giving us that makes that 20% just worthwhile, because we do get to that point eventually if we have the resilience to stay in it. And so, brother, we've had some, delicious kōrero, and the wānanga has been, really great. But I just want to pass it over to you, brother. Do you have any final words, for the community of the Planting Seeds podcast? I just want to pass it over to you to close us off.
I think in the spirit of reflecting the name of this podcast, Planting Seeds, when you plant a forest, there is no end point, right? In life, there is no like end point other than, when you die. And we can't really control that. The point is the growing and developing with that forest. The seeds that you plant today, or even the things that you're harvesting today, are from seeds that you planted months and years ago. And so it's that just gentle reminder to never stop planting seeds, right? Planting seeds of good habits in your life, planting seeds of approaching relationships with care and attention. How can I leave this place better than I found it? How can I be a good steward to the landscape, internally, externally, and the people around me? Thank you very much, man.
Okay. Brother, thank you for those parting words. Thank you for being a good friend, for the work that you're doing. As we reflect on the name planting seeds, and you're actually a practitioner of that, but you're planting seeds that you might not even see the fruits of. But the family that you've supported, the marae that you've supported, the hapu that you've supported, and that fruit, being able to provide for their families and for those areas is, something that I'm sure, provides a beautiful feeling within yourself. And that's the sense of meaning, as you're making a positive contribution into other people's lives, but more so into the whenua. And, when we just think about the landscape that we're in at the moment, and I feel the work that you're doing and giving back to the land is so admirable. Someone who grew up over in the States, but you're here giving back to the whenua rather than taking. And that's a really, beautiful thing to, see you doing that, and for it to be received by other people within Te Ao Māori are seeing the value in these systems that you're doing on the whenua. And so I just wanted to close off by acknowledging you for your meaningful work that you are doing, and something that I think I'll leave here that aligns from Tony Robbins. And he said, meaning comes from contributing something towards something that is greater than yourself. And being in that kind of space, knowing that you're doing something, because at the moment you've already got all that you need as an individual, but it feels as though what is giving more is you're sharing that with others, and it's helping them in their own journey. And so just want to thank you, brother. Love you heaps. And if you want to say something else.
I think just one last thing, that it's really just a quick call out for especially men in this world. There's a lot of men that I talk to who feel a lack of purpose, right? We need that as men. What we also need in this world is a lot of trees being planted, a lot of food being provided for communities. There's a huge need for strong, capable people, men and women alike, in this field of food forestry. I think it combines beautifully with the ecological crisis that the land is in. We've deforested this whole country. And it combines beautifully with this need for doing purposeful, meaningful work that we can see makes a tangible difference in the landscape, in our communities, and in our hearts. So just to call out, anybody who's interested in agroforestry, food forestry, got a bunch of stuff on the YouTube channel. Go check it out. We need more of this work happening.
Beautiful, brother.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. And to the Planting Seeds Farm note, thank you for being here. Let us know in the comments what you enjoyed. And I'll have Byron's tags as well in there for you to go and follow. So much free content. It's ridiculous how much the bro produces. But we'll see you in the next episode, and let's go 2025.
Let's grow.
Blessings.
That was fun.
Yeah, brother.
I enjoyed that.